Welcome to the Dear Doc podcast, where we will discuss the business of running a dental practice with a panel of experts. Now, your host, Dr. Christopher Hoffpower.
Hey guys, welcome to the Dear Doc podcast. Thank you for joining us again. This is Dr. Christopher Hoffpower, your host, and I'm coming to you now from my home studio here in Alvin, Texas. And guys, today do I have a treat for you. Everybody knows the name Carl Misch. They know about the Misch Institute. And unfortunately, Carl, as a giant in implantology, has passed, but he left a clear line of succession. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Randy Resnick. Randy, how the hell are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me with you today.
Truly my pleasure. Just in the short time that I've known you, I've been very impressed by not just your knowledge, but your ability to take a very complex subject and to distill it down into something that every general dentist can understand, and should do. And the reason that we brought you on today is to talk a little bit about the economics of dental implants and why every GP out there should be doing them. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about who you are, Randy. Tell me about your life as a dentist and your path getting here.
Okay, so I grew up in a dental household. My father was a old-time prosthodontist for probably 40 years in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I always wanted to go to dental school. When I went into dental school, I really liked prosthetics, but I really liked surgery. At that time, when I was at the University of Pittsburgh, Carl Misch started a residency program in implantology, and also he was going through a pros residency at the same time. So Carl and I got to know each other. Carl's brother Craig was also a resident. We were all residents together in the same program. And then after we got through the pros program, we went on to the implant surgery fellowship. And that's where a lot of these principles that we still teach today were the genesis of a lot of these principles. So from that point, myself and Craig, we were involved with the Misch Institute. And now that Carl unfortunately passed in 2017, I've kind of taken over the reins. So I've been with Carl from the beginning of the Misch Institute. We're the largest implant training center in the world. We probably train more dentists than any other training facility. And it's mainly based on Carl Misch's classifications and protocols, which are universally used throughout the world.
I have had the great pleasure of meeting some of the greats in dentistry, and one of those that I consider one of the greats is Dr. Paul Homily. And he told me once, he and Carl were chatting, and if you know Paul, he likes to hang out at the bar after CE, and
oh yeah,
which is where I met him.
Yeah.
And he said, one day he and Carl were chatting, and Carl shook his head. He said, "Paul, I could make a living for the rest of my life just fixing the problems I see with implants that come into my practice." From what I understand, he teaches one of the things that are taught one of the things that I truly believe that most implant organizations, most implant institutes and courses are lacking, and that is what to do when everything goes wrong. Because that really, you should be starting from a foundation of that kind of knowledge, because that's the thing that keeps, I think, people from implementation. And a little bit later, we're going to talk about the effect that that's had on your students and the number of people who have implemented after taking your courses. So tell me a little bit about the Misch Institute in and of itself.
Well, the Misch Institute it started out as basically a surgical course. Now we have a prosthetic course, we have a complication course, we have a CBCT course. My input on the Institute right from the beginning was radiology. I did my master's thesis on CT scans. So that was back in the late 80s. So
Wow.
I've always been lecturing on that. It's interesting you talk about the complications, because throughout the years of the Institute, Carl I got to hear all the complications that doctors across the country would have. So about 2010, go to Carl. I go, Carl, the next book, let's write a complications book. And he said, no, no, no. I go, really, it needs to be written.
Absolutely.
So I finally talked him into it around 2013. And unfortunately, he got sick shortly thereafter. But I did write the book and I finished the book. And what I always tell dentists, and I tell them that at our first session, if you want to be if you want to take your practice to the next level and become the implant person in your community, you read this complications book and learn how to fix things. Because just like what you said, what Carl said to Paul Homley, there's a niche in dentistry on complications. Not many people want to treat implant complications or know how to treat them. If you do, you're going to build your practice, because one complication leads to another, and everyone learns that you're the one to go to. But anyway, that's a little side point of that. With our program, we have, what I like about our doctors that go through, these are committed doctors. At the very beginning of the Misch Institute, they were mainly specialists. Oral surgeons and periodontists came through. Now it's almost all general dentists. And I've really strived to make it where a general dentist can go to the next level. I see so many dentists that come to our program that are so tired of the drill and the fill, insurance-based practice, and they need to do something different. And all they have to do is listen to us. And like the numbers, when we look at what our graduates do, it's unbelievable. It transforms them, their practice, their everything about their life. It takes it to the next level. So,
it's funny. I have a good friend who does a lot of sleep dentistry. Her name is Dr. Meghna Dasani, and she talks about love languages, or the languages people communicate in. And you speak my love language: efficiency and getting off of insurance so you can be paid as a professional what it is that you truly deserve. Now, personally, for me, a big part of my journey to becoming a fee-for-service practice and becoming successful as a dentist was the ability to do things that insurance didn't pay for. And implants is one of those things. Now, I've asked you to talk a little bit about the ROI that people get from courses like this. And you went a step further for me. For the first time in the history of this podcast, someone actually went out and made a 30-page PowerPoint that explained every single thing in detail. So guys, you are going to get a miniature implant. I should hesitate to say mini implants in the same course that I'm talking about, the Misch Institute, because I know how he felt about those. So a micro version of an implant course here. And I'm going to give you the floor. So Randy, if you wouldn't mind.
So what I do is I feel that, there's so much information out there, and for doctors to absorb it all, it's very difficult. That's why a lot of our doctors come through 2 and 3 times through our program. But what I do now is every one of my slides in our program, I give it to them in a handout. So it was very easy, and I think it's a good way to learn if there is a PowerPoint. So I did put one together for you now. So Excellent. Let me see if I can share the screen.
And Randy, is that something that you can send me for me to post for our members?
Oh, definitely. I'll send you this so you can post it. So basically, what Chris wanted me to talk about is basically how to build a frugal practice and not really get in over your head and make it profitable for you.
Like I said, full disclosure, Randy, the reason I asked you that is because I spent too much, and it took me years to get out of the debt I accumulated. So I think that what you're doing right now is going to save a whole lot of dentists a whole lot of heartache and stomach lining. So thank you.
Yeah, so I'll take that to the next level. One thing that I saw year after year, doctors going through our program, is they get this education and they know how to do things, but the expense of starting it was so absorbent, but it didn't need to be. So what I've done is I've dummied it down a little bit to where this is what all that you need to start a practice, and you can basically turn a profit in a week after this. What a lot of our graduates, I always tell them, my goal is you spend one weekend with us. That next weekend or that next week in private practice, if you implement what we teach you, you will pay for the course, pay for all your expenses, and then you'll have a net profit after it. And it usually happens. But anyway, so let's get in, because I do have, general dentists are in the perfect position to start an implant practice. As a specialist, a lot of specialists don't like general dentists to do implants. I'm not, complete opposite. I think every general dentist should be placing implants. To be honest with you, here's one root canal on the right side. The last root canal I did was in 1986. To do a root canal, I think that's probably about 10 times more difficult than an implant. An implant's one of the easiest procedures that you will do. I can train doctors to do a lateral wall sinus lift in about 20 minutes. A lot of people can't do a posterior composite in 20 minutes. So it's all about training. And the big thing is treatment planning. You have to know which are the good cases, which are the bad cases. But general dentists are in the perfect position. They see patients every single day that need implants. If you look in Europe, about 90% of general dentists are doing surgically placing implants. In the United States, it's going up, but it's still around 15%.
Do you think that's because of fear? Do you think it's because of fear of being known, or fear of litigation?
It is. It is. And my other hobby is I do a lot of malpractice cases defending doctors. Almost every day I'm doing, and I see where doctors get into trouble, and a lot of it is the treatment plan, and then the fear from that prevents them from getting in. And the way that we teach this, it's very basic. You will never get into trouble if you adhere to these principles. So the bottom line is, everyone, if you go to your charts, you will find implant patients. I guarantee I could go in anyone's office and pull 10 charts, and one or two of those patients would be implant patients. But you have to integrate it into your practice, and that includes your staff. Your staff has to understand what you do. We do sometimes where we do a auxiliary course, and what our staff does is they'll call doctors' offices and act like a patient asking for implants. And you wouldn't believe what some of the front desk receptionists say. They don't know what a dental implant. Yeah. Well, no, we refer them here. We do this. So you have to get everyone on board, but there's plenty of patients out there. As for revenue, I'll tell you what, I have seen doctors double, triple, quadruple their practices in 1 to 2 years. A great article is Charles Vogel article. I lecture on this a lot. This is dental economics, and he goes through. You can still refer cases, but if you start doing procedures in your office, you just exponentially increase your profits there. So as we know, and what Chris made a great point, I can't tell you the doctors, they're so tired of the insurance. I never took insurance, so I just know the bad things, what people tell me about it. And I can't imagine every day just going in and working for things that basically you're losing money on and you're spinning your wheels. This gives you an out. And it's an easy out because everyone has the skill to do it. And, if we look at these are this is our fee schedule that we give out at the Misch Institute, kind of my fee schedule in the ADA. And most of these procedures aren't covered by insurance. So basically, this is the fees that you're going to be charging. And, I read an article that said where if a doctor works about 40 hours a week doing general dentistry and they start doing implants, they can take that down to about 16 hours.
Absolutely true.
And the same net profit in less than half the time. What I like to see, my goal is to get every doctor to be placing implants. We have a course coming up in Texas in
Dallas,
less than a month. Our first course.
And you guys actually gave our members in the business of dentistry a special discounted rate on that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, actually, Heidi, our administrative director, gave me a slide. It's at the very end that there's
Excellent.
and I'll explain that. But what I always like to see doctors, I really push them, and they will email me. I look at every one of their cases. I look at their CT scans. We have a CT company there that actually they'll treatment plan it, but I approve it before they do it, before the doctor does it. But this is what our grads do: 98% placing implants, 97 performing bone grafts. And in the first year, they increase their income by 23%. So it's really significant. And this is only the start, because it just builds upon each year. You learn to do more and more. But what don't I like about this? Because too many doctors fall prey to the salespeople. It's just the way it is, and I hate to see it. So I'm a huge advocate on buying only what you need. You don't need all these bells and whistles. So the first area is instruments. You know, you see these instrument kits, which might cost you $2,500, all these kits. You don't need that. So for every procedure that we do, I have Selvin do it. They call it the Resnik Frugal Kit. It's the bare minimum. And a lot of these instruments you will have in your practice. So you can just kind of pick which ones you have to add to it. And I'm very simple. When I do surgery, I don't want to see a lot of instruments, because then that's too difficult. You know, it's not a hard procedure if you go by the protocol. And so you don't need all these instruments. I had this in my textbook too. I go through the instruments that you need, the ones that maybe in the future, when you get more elaborate, you can add on. But at the beginning, you certainly don't need it. As for implants,
so Randy,
so many of our doctors
on your instrument kit, I'm going to make a suggestion, and very humbly here, because I know what an amazing knowledge base you've got in implants. But couldn't you reduce your number of instruments in that package by one if you use an Olsen-Hagar needle driver instead of a standardized needle driver?
Yes. And those are some of the, in fact, I have that in the textbook. Some of the more, this is just a basic one that they put together, and we actually have that. We teach that. We use those in our laboratories.
I've got something I'll send you. I actually created a combination Olsen-Hagar Castroviejo.
Okay.
That is a small needle driver.
Okay.
I'm going to send you a couple of them. Let me send those to you. And if you use them, you love them, just tell people about them. I don't even make a cent off of it. I just commissioned a company to make them. Yeah.
And another example is sinus graft curettes. If you buy these kits, they'll have 15 instruments in them. Nice. I've done probably thousands and thousands of sinus grafts. You need 2 instruments. That's all you need. 2 instruments. But a lot of people are oversold. So that's the first area. Second is implants.
Absolutely.
Doctors really get oversold on these. You know, and Chris will probably vouch for this. Implants work now. It's not like the old days when, you know, if you were one of the Paul Homleys, you know, when we first started doing this back in the 80s and 90s, you know, instruments, the parts wouldn't fit together. Some wouldn't work. The coatings were bad. Now everything's FDA approved. Most implants work. They have their little bells and whistles to them, but you have to be careful. When you look at an implant, how much does an implant cost to make? Okay. People would be surprised. It's less than, probably less than $5 to make an implant. So to buy an implant that is a premium implant like this, there's 5 or 6 companies that still charge $350 for an implant. It's crazy. And then I always feel bad for the general dentist, because what I see, and being a specialist, I get sold this bill of goods. Okay, put my implant in. I'm going to give you, instead of $350, I'm going to charge you $200.
Right.
But then what we'll do is we're going to make it up on the restorative phase. So now the poor general dentist gets the abutment. And instead of an abutment, which should cost about $100, they're being charged $250 or whatever. So you have to be careful of these premium companies. And if you look at these premium companies, a lot of them now have value or discount implants as an alternative because now they're figuring out that it's not working. What I do recommend people stay away from is the discount ones. Okay.
I love that you had Alabama there. That's great.
So for a couple reasons, as I defend dentists all the time, and I see this happening. They'll get an implant for $30, but then it's not restorable, and then the patient, it goes somewhere else, and now someone else throws the first dentist under the bus, and now it gets real ugly. So you don't want to do that. You want to. There's enough companies out there. I use the Hahn implant from Glidewell. Probably $130, $140 an implant. That's great. But what I like about this system or the value implant systems is you can get these bundle packages where you get the motor, the implant, and an inventory. What you want to be careful of, if you go back to those premium implants, doctors would buy one implant at a time. So you're doing an implant in number 19. You want a 5x12 implant, but you go in and you find out, you know what? I can't put a 12 in. I need a 10 millimeter, but you don't have it.
Yeah.
So I like doctors to have an inventory. And
I agree.
when you're paying $350 an implant, that's hard to do. Really hard to swat. And why do that? So actually with the Glidewell, they have the Resnik kit where I actually hand pick here. This one on the upper left is 20 implants. I picked the 20 most common sizes. And so the doctors, they can just get those 20, and no matter what type of surgery they're doing, they're going to be covered.
I'm going to tell you right now, Randy, that was whenever I first started off, one of my biggest, interbulations is I couldn't figure out which implants I was going to need because they didn't teach me in the course what the most common sizes were. And how was I know how many of each one I was going to need? Over 7 years or so, I've gotten my system down pretty well. And we do exactly what you said. We keep an inventory, maybe 10 of the most common, and then 3 of the least of the next least common, one of the rares, maybe sometimes. But in a lot of those situations where it's a rare implant, let's say I'm going to be placing a 6x6 of something and I don't have it in stock, I'll just tell the patient, hey, look, this is a very rare size. I'm going to have to order it. I will get it next day air. No big deal. You don't have to keep everything in your office. You are not a warehouse. You're a dental practice.
Yes.
But you should have the minimum most common. And Randy, I just love that you did this for them because it takes the pain point out.
Yeah. But what I hear is a doctor will call me the day before surgery and they'll say, oh, you know what? Maybe I should order one size longer, one size shorter. And then what they do is they'll call their company and they'll say, okay, overnight, next morning, those 2 implants. But then they see they have a $50 charge for overnighting, and then it makes no sense. So that's what I like. Yeah. And doctors, a lot of them are associates now. They don't have the ability to do that either because a lot of them they can't order. So the bottom line, why I did this is you don't need to go with the top implant company out there, the top seller. That's not the way it is. You just have to use a good, reputable company that you can get parts to in the future. You never want to put yourself at risk where you buy this, the Alibaba implant, and then you can't restore it because now you have an implant in the jaw that can't be restored, and now you have a patient that's upset.
You also don't know legitimately that this implant has FDA clearance. If they don't have a 510K on file, then you are committing malpractice, aren't you?
Exactly. And it looks bad. Even if it's not a deviation from the standard of care, it looks very sloppy.
Right.
Okay. So if something happens and, you just don't want to put yourself in that position, and you don't have to because there's alternatives now. So, and the alternatives are financially feasible for most doctors.
Absolutely.
So the next area that I think people really get oversold on is bone graft material. So if you look at, there's 4 types of bone graft, and I wish we had enough time. I could talk about this for like 2 hours.
Absolutely.
But there are different types of bone graft material, and the companies out there will tell you, oh, use this one because this heals faster, this and that. Bone heals by the way, the type of bone it is. And allograft bone is basically the best. There's 2 types. There's mineralized and demineralized. Bottom line, demineralized resorbs faster, but it's osteoinductive, so it induces bone growth. Mineralized stays around longer, so it maintains the space, which you need to grow new bone, but it's also osteoconductive. Right. So when you buy the bone, a combination of mineralized, demineralized is best. That's what we use for a long, long time. The problem with that is that you would have to buy 2 vials, one demineralized, one mineralized, right, and add them together. Now you have added expense. The easiest way now is like LifeNet through Salvin, they have a demin-min blend. Okay, that's exactly so you get the benefits of both. And for an extraction site, for a ridge augmentation, that's all that you need. So be very, very careful with bone. And you know, when you're buying bone and you're looking at, say, 1 cc and you're going over $100 per 1 cc, you know that it's way too much, and you don't need to. And you want to make sure, though, it's FDA approved. You do want to make sure the bone is.
Well, and there's what, 3 or 4 tissue banks across the United States that are FDA approved, right? And they just resell it to everybody else, and sometimes they'll spend like mixing it. So I actually use Maxius because I can get it for $65 instead of for a CC rather than, you know, $125 or whatever it is some of these places are charging. But
yeah. And even more, some of these 1 cc allograft will $250 because they spin it some different way. But if I have a whole chapter on this in the textbook, if you learn how bone heals, then you would realize that, you know, unless you're using bone growth factors, there's really no way to enhance it. But you have to use the right bone.
Right. And I do want to get into some bone growth factors in a little bit, and also mesenchymal stem cells and things like that with PRF. And we can chat about that after this. But I see a very, very important slide up right now, which is the bankruptcy motor and the you have a profitable practice motor. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Actually, I love that, but I love that terminology. So one of the problems, as I said, our Misch doctors, I would get to know these doctors, and then at the very end, they would go to buy a motor, such as this one on the left. And, you know, $10,000, $15,000 for a motor because it has all the bells and whistles. It sings to you. It has a fiber optic, all this. I'm more old school. I like things that are proven and can work, but they don't bankrupt you. So I have this Aseptico motor here on the right. Now, when I started private practice 32 years ago, I bought an Aseptico motor, and I still have that. It still works. They're workhorses. Now, the difference in that is probably about $8,000. So the Aseptico are great. They're workhorses, and they're very, very inexpensive. So be very careful. You know, you'll be sold a bill of goods because this one does this and that. And
absolutely.
The other problem that you have is when these motors go bad and they need to be refurbished. To refurbish that motor cable on that Aseptico is probably going to be $300-$400. The one on the left is going to be $1,500, $2,000.
I've had that same exact motor, except I'm cheaper than you. I got the 1-foot pedal. I didn't get the variable, the one where you can click all your settings.
Okay.
Besides, my feet are so big, I'd hit them all at one time. You know.
Actually, I don't like all those. They're too hard to use, and I do like the one step. And it makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah. So if we look at some of the mistakes to conclude, where doctors fall prey to mistakes. And the first thing, I use this slide all the time with our doctors. Wow. You don't need a surgery suite. Everyone wants to have a surgery suite. That's the last thing you need. You don't need a surgical light, whatever. Use your regular operatory as long as it's, 8x8, you can do anything in there. You don't need a surgery suite whatsoever. And you don't need right off the bat to be buying PZO surgery units. You don't need to be buying lasers. You'll hear about navigational surgery. This is all stuff that's nice, but to spend $50,000 on a robotic arm to put the implant in, I can show you how to do it in about 3 minutes with zero stress. To set one of these units up, it takes, first of all, you need an extra auxiliary, so that's costing you money. Secondly, it'll take you a couple hours to set it up, and then you have to calibrate it. It makes no sense.
These guys, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the XNav you're looking at there. And whenever it first came out, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2 engineers from ICAT who originated ICAT whenever they sold the company. They were selling these things for $23,000 at the time, begging people to take them. And now, if I'm not mistaken, they're like 75 grand. And same technology, nothing's changed. It's just now there's more acceptance. And so now they don't have to be begging people to take the units.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, there's a place, some people like it, but if you learn, first of all, you have to understand general dentists, what do they do every day? They use this. Yep. They use a handpiece, a lot more than any of the specialists do.
Absolutely.
You have the skill. The manual dexterity to do any procedure is you already have it. You just have to learn that specific skill.
The way I tell people, when I have students who come into my office a lot who are just graduating from dental school or haven't graduated yet. And I talk to them a little bit about implants, and I tell them general dentists are the most fitting people to restore implants because we're planning from the prosthetic down, which is how all implants should be placed. And the second thing is we learn to see with our hands. If you're doing a class 2 filling DO on number 19 or number 18 way in the back of the mouth, there is no way you're having primary visualization. You don't see it at all. You see with your hand. You understand what dentin feels like. You understand what an enamel feels like. And you can actually literally feel the margins as you're prepping those fillings. That same kind of tactile sensation is exactly what you need to be able to place implants with confidence.
Yes. And everyone has the skill. It's just a different skill set that you were never learn because, it's hard in dental school. There's not enough time for graduates coming out now. They can't even get their requirements done to do single crowns, let alone implants. So,
absolutely.
So, one of the last areas is CT technology. And I've been lecturing on this since I was a resident. And the first CT scanner I had was $250,000. And, that's all there was 15 years ago, but there's a lot of other alternatives. To buy a new CT right now, my opinion is it's going to depreciate right away, and it's really not worth it. There are companies out there. The company that I use is called Renew, 30 to 40% off of a new one, but they're certified. So what they do is they go in and they put all new software in, and they build the machine. It's basically buying a certified car. It works great, and you get a warranty on it. There is no reason to buy a new one. I just had one of our doctors buy a ICAT that was, I believe, 5 years old for $29,000 at the last course. Okay, now think about that.
That's amazing.
I mean, these newer machines are upwards of $100,000, some of them. But what people go wrong is they look at this, and I want to make certain that you know this. Do not get a large field of view. You only need a medium field of view. Large field of view takes pictures of things you don't want to have to diagnose. There's no reason to take an image of someone's white matter and determine if there's any pathology there. So medium field of view is all you need. And like I said, the certified pre-owned make a lot of sense to me.
And there's an additional portion there that you're not bringing up, and that is in our litigious society, if you have it on screen, you are responsible for it. If there is something there, you're not responsible for diagnosing a brain tumor, but if you notice brain sand and you don't tell them to go to a radiologist or an oncologist because they might have a pineal tumor, and if you don't know what I just said, you need to take the courses that Randy offers.
Yeah. So I often hear this, well, where do I get started? Well, I'll tell you what, here is what we do. Our courses they build upon each other. We start at the basic. You learn to do atraumatic extractions and you do socket grafting. You would not believe how much you will increase your income just by starting to take out teeth and putting bone in.
Absolutely.
And it's an easy procedure. Also, you have to be careful that when you do take out teeth and you don't offer the choice of socket grafting, now there is a standard of care issue, because if that patient ever goes in someone else's office and they say, oh, why didn't they graft that socket? I want an implant. Now I need a onlay bone graft. Now it's a problem. So you start there, and the most important thing is your first case. Where do I see people who start their first case? They want to do an immediate placement in a maxillary molar or mandibular molar.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. It's crazy. First of all, you can't see back there and there's no bone. And certainly, why work over a nerve? So what I have everyone do is look for the first bicuspid or possibly a second bicuspid. You look right up there. There's bleeding. If the patient bleeds, you're not going to see anything, but there's always a column of bone anterior to the sinus. It's a perfect site. It's not really in the aesthetic area. So it's an easy place to start. So when you look at this, so that's what I have every doctor do the first day, and it works. What you don't want to do is start on this, okay, or this one. And everyone wants to take out teeth and place implants the same day. Yeah, you can get to that level, but why do it at the beginning? Patients, I've never had a patient say to me, Randy, I'm not going to have this work done because it's going to take too long. If you explain it to the patient, why you have to take the tooth out, graft the socket, and let the hard and soft tissue heal, they understand because they know that you're doing it the best way. So when we teach these procedures, you start from the basic and then you get more difficult. So you go from extraction to what we call division A cases, which is abundant bone. Then B is where it's thinner bone, C and D where it's really atrophied. Where I see the lawsuit and the complications, people start with the C and D cases first. They do it backwards. So what we do is, the way we teach this is we start with, and while you're starting to do these extraction socket grafts and division A cases, you're building your skill set and you're learning the treatment planning skill set, which makes a lot of sense, and it works. And that's why, we've been so successful over the 35 years of doing this. So you asked what type of courses. We give all type of courses. We pros surgery, CBCT is one of our most popular, and complications also. So, but these are the principles that are basically accepted all over the world. If you look at I have 2 textbooks that I've written in the last 3 years, and both of those are bestsellers that are used at most dental schools now. So the protocols and the classifications that Carl came up with, 30 some years ago, they're hold true, and they make people profitable and successful.
Absolutely. And that is the point, isn't it?
Yes.
It's not a great thing whenever you're successful but not profitable.
Yes.
So, well, Randy, I'm gonna ask you to let us know where they can get those books first of all, and then I'm going to ask you to talk to us a little bit about the course that we're offering soon in Dallas, Texas, and what all will be covered there, and okay, whether or not the curriculum is going to be entirely based in Dallas, one class after another, or if there will be some travel to the Misch Institute as well. So, floor is yours, my friend.
Okay, so first, the textbooks. The first book that came out in 2017, right when Carl passed away, was called The Complications, and it's called Avoiding Complications in Oral Implantology. And basically, it's surgery, prosthetics, maintenance of dental implants, and how to prevent problems. If you do have a problem, how to treat it. And that is published by Elsevier. So it can be got, you can purchase that on Amazon or Elsevier. The latest textbook that just came out this year is the new surgery edition. It's called the 4th edition of Contemporary Implant Dentistry. And that's about almost 1,300 pages of every aspect of the surgical phase. That also can be purchased at Amazon or Elsevier. As for our programs, we usually have a West Coast and an East Coast curriculum for the surgery program. It entails 5 programs. You don't have to take all 5. You can just take one or mix and match them. The first one is basically we go from the very beginning of patient evaluation, go into the CT scan. I'm real heavy in the CT scan about anatomy, how to read them. And then we go into how to place implants into abundant bone. And this course, the one we have coming up in April, is in Dallas. Our next session, we're just finishing a session next week in Orlando. And our East Coast curriculums are done in Orlando. And that will be more towards the end of the year, or September, we'll start back in Orlando. But the first session, what we do is it's basically didactic and hands-on, such as I show doctors how to stretch tissue so you don't get incision line opening. Incision line openings, most common complication. What I see most general dentists, they don't have a lot of experience in stretching tissue. Mm-hmm. So what we do is every session, we give you lab procedures where you stretch tissue. We use pig's feet, pig jaws. We use other models to do that. So we do that for almost everything. Bone density, compressing bone, using osteotomes. Everything is hands-on. So whatever I teach at the podium, you go and you do it in the lab. So what I have found is if you don't get to use these, then it doesn't get here as well.
Absolutely.
So, and that's through every session. So session 2 is where we teach multiple implants and treatment of edentulous ridge, mainly overdentures, things like that. Right. Session 3 is ridge augmentation. We show you how to build up ridges from very small ones to very large ones. Usually now it's mostly tent procedures. We still do teach blocks, but that's not as common. Right. The 4th session is basically we call it the Sinus Weekend. This used to be all lateral wall procedures. Now we do most of them crustally. So I have a model that you do about 5 or 6 of these during our weekend. Every one will have 2 millimeters bone, one will have 4 millimeters bone on their sinus, one will have a thick membrane, one will have a thin membrane. And then the last course is immediate load weekend, and that's what we have next weekend in Orlando. So this is all immediate load, all on 4, and then we also teach how to treat peri-implant disease. If you look at one of the biggest problems in implant dentistry that not many people talk about is perimucositis, which is analogous to gingivitis, is upwards of 60% of our patients. Peri-implantitis, which is analogous to periodontal disease, is upwards of 20% of our patients. But most people don't know how to treat it the right way. So we actually, like for this course, they go through a hands-on lab on how to actually detoxify an implant and graft it. It's very easy if you know the correct protocol on how to do it.
So I've got to ask a question here. I want to get into PRF and talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
But I have to make an admission here. I think I told you already that I'm one of those people you're talking to who spent too much on toys. One of the few that I don't regret is my Autotome. I love my Autotome.
Yeah, it's surprising. I did a webinar last night. There was for Glidewell. There was 1,800 people on, and the first question was from the audience was, how good does Autotome work? And I have a video of it. I showed the video last night, and I said, you know what, patients love it. Yeah. You know, I used to use a mallet.
Oh, let me come at you with this hammer right here.
Yeah. And the Autotome, if you don't know what that is, it's a pneumatic periotome that you place on your implant handpiece, and basically it works itself. And what it does is you put it between the tooth and the crib-form plate of the bone, and what it does is it compresses the bone and expands the bone, so it's easier to get out these little root tips in most teeth.
Oh, and sinus lift protocol with it too is fantastic.
And sinus lift, it's even easier. Yeah.
It's funny. I feel, because I haven't written down the data, and I hate whenever people say, "Oh, this is my empiric proof," but I feel as if I have had less complications, because what I noticed is the closer to the patient's face I got, I would change my rhythm and my strength of tapping on the osteotome. And with the autotome, you don't have to worry about that, because it's very, very controlled. There's no human error except for over pushing. And I've actually heard of a couple of people who've over pushed into the sinus or what have you, but throw some PRF in there, look, heal up. But talk to us a little bit about PRF, and is that something that you guys teach in your advanced classes?
Yeah, so in session 3, we teach PRF. Now, let me go back to the origins of PRF. It was actually PRP back in probably the 90s. One company called the Harvest Machine came out, and we used to do that all the time. I don't like a lot of toys, but that's one that I do use. Now, I do it more frugally, though. We use, basically, we do a blood draw, conventional centrifuge. It works great. I do a ton of bone grafting. It works.
And people tell you, the angulation kills the cells, and this kind of, it doesn't.
No, that's that. It says, they say that it degranulates the platelets too early. That doesn't. I've seen it work too long, and it works. I've got 2 machines. I've got the original Shukaron machine, and I've got a Salvin machine, and I actually have a background as a molecular and cellular biologist, so I was very, very familiar with doing histological surveys and things like that. And so I actually looked at them under my microscope, and there wasn't any difference. It's all BS. Yes. It's all sales hype. You're 100% right. And these people, they will spend thousands and thousands of dollars on this.
$3,500, $2,500, something like that. You can get it for $900, $600 sometimes.
500. What you need is a centrifuge that will spin at 3,000 RPMs. Right. But to answer your question, what we do at the Misch course is I have everyone learn how to draw blood, and I have videos on it, so we show everyone, but then we have everyone do it on each other. And I can't tell you how often I get emails from doctors tell me that was the best thing I ever did, because it takes your practice to the next level. A lot of dentists don't like to draw blood. And I always say, what other medical professional uses a needle more than us? We give more injections than anyone. It's just a different type. So if you do it a couple times, it becomes commonplace, and it's not hard to do.
So what I did is I pulled in an RN who needed SRPs, and I pulled in a friend of mine who needed some implants, and I said, okay, here's the deal. I want to be trained, and I want my entire team to be trained in phlebotomy in the state of Texas. And you guys have to be careful in your state laws here, because California, for one, I know you have to be a licensed phlebotomist. But in Texas, we're Wild West over here, so you can do anything you want. You can get your assistants trained. Just do it through, a course. For somebody who's an ENT or rather EMT, and have your team draw the blood. It's a step you don't have to take. But I still, if I go in and they're having a difficult time, I stick it one time, boom, all one and done. And that's important to be able to do. So you need a course like this that's going to get you out of your comfort zone, so you can learn to draw blood, so that when your team can't get it, and I allow mine 2 strikes, because I think 3 strikes and you're out. You try twice, you don't get the blood, you come and you get me. And mostly it's those little old ladies with the thin arms that you can see through their arms. They have no veins.
Actually, I have, when I was writing the textbook, I wanted to write about doing the PRF, and there's very few books out there on basically drawing blood the way that we do, whether
Right.
it's a butterfly or a vacutainer. So I wrote a really comprehensive part in the textbook. So if anyone really wants to learn how to do it, they can really read that, and then it makes a lot of sense. But there's not a lot of literature out there on the basics of it because, a lot of people have someone come in and train them. So, but if you want to learn more about it, it's something I think everyone should be doing in their office, and it works.
Absolutely.
And you know what? You don't need these huge disposables. I got turned off from Harvest back in the 90s. The disposable kits were $150.
Right.
And you threw half of the stuff away, probably not half, 80% of the stuff away. And now what I use is a regular vacutainer test tube and a butterfly or a catheter.
As long as it's glass and has no citrate in it, you're going to be able to make APRF. You're going to be able to make APRF plus. If you have a plastic container with, I believe a silicone coating is the one that we get, but no citrate, then you can make IPRF. It has something to do with the electrostatic charge on plastic wall containers.
Okay.
To the best of my knowledge, that's why it works that way. But I was actually going to ask you, do you run 2 centrifuges as well? Do you put all your APRF in the first draw, IPRF in the second draw?
No, I still do it the one. If you look at the studies, so platelet-rich plasma was the first one that came out, and you had to respin that, use 2 centrifuges or double centrifuge it. But if you look at PRF has been proven to be better. It has a higher concentration of
I run 2
platelets.
centrifuges to make PRF. I make IPRF in one and APRF in the other. Is that
I do
one draw because I don't like to stick my patients twice. And you can just put a little bit of saline, bleed out 1 tube, and then go for the rest. You just don't want to get a clot in your line. I learned that trick from my sister who's a cardiac nurse. But anyway, it changed things. Patients don't want to be stuck twice, but I do like having IPRF sitting on the side just in case I need to make some sticky bone or something. Yeah.
But it does work, and everyone should be doing it. And we've been teaching that for over 15 years now. Definitely.
My team calls it the magic blood boogers.
Yeah. It works. It works.
Well, Carl, this has been amazing. And I can't wait to get to chat with you some more and to take some of these courses. As you know, I do a lot of implants, but man, I learn implantology. I love it so much. I learn something new every time I take a course. In fact, I learn something new when I take the same course twice sometimes. Just something that your level of knowledge wasn't such that it's stuck on the little web of knowledge you've got in your brain. And, you come back with a little bit more experience, and all of a sudden you have this epiphany moment. You're like, I can't believe I didn't pick that up the first time. I could have been doing better. It's amazing to me. It makes me feel great to know that I'm doing something that I can keep learning for the rest of my life and provides me a great income.
And it's fun. I look at some of our doctors, especially late in their careers, and they're worn out. This re-energizes their career. I had one of my attendings from when I was in residency, in pros residency. He was 75 years old. He came through our course, and he practiced for 5 more years, surgically placing implants, and he loved it. So it really energizes you. So like I said at the beginning, I'm a huge advocate that all general dentists should be doing it. And if you're not placing implants, you're surely missing out on a big part of your potential practice.
Absolutely. Great revenue stream too. And I'm going to ask one final thing. And if you guys don't have a course in this, I'm going to make a suggestion humbly that you do so. Do you have a course in getting the patient to say yes?
Yes. So we have what is called an auxiliary course. Okay. And Paul Homily used to run this course many, many years ago.
That does not surprise me.
Paul, I've known Paul since the 1980s, and he's great. He's just unbelievable. But we kind of got away from it for a couple years. We just brought it back. So we do have an auxiliary course where doctors, they bring their staff, and basically it's a how to have the patients go for treatment, but it utilizes the whole staff. So not only the hygienists come, the assistants, but also the front desk.
Absolutely.
And then we break them into different groups to learn these different ways of doing it.
Well, I'm going to get you to stop your screen share real quick, and then
Okay.
And then ask you a couple of final questions before we close this down. And thank you so much for your time today, and in answering my request to come on the podcast. What do you think about the way that the world is changing right now, looking at implants? It seems like implantology is actually taking a race to the bottom, where you've got these guys who are placing an implant and restoring the implant for $1,000. And first of all, I don't understand how you can do that. Well, actually, now that I've seen the Alabiba, I'm pretty sure I know how they're doing it. But,
Yes.
So what do you think about that trend? Do you think that that's going to be something that's long lasting? Do you think that that is going to be something that that injures our profession in the long run, or will that kind of die off as patients realize you can either have quality or you can have cost?
Yeah. My opinion, first of all, implantology, back when I started, very few people did it. And a lot of people look down upon doing it. You can talk to Paul Homley about this.
Right.
People they just thought this was voodoo, doing it. Now it's become accepted. And companies like Clear Choice, who run these ads continuously, they're educating.
I agree. I completely agree.
They're educating everyone on this, that now it has become accepted. And, it's like anything, you're going to have a lower end. Someone's going to try to do something for an unbelievably low price. But I've never seen that to be a problem. In my practice, I just never saw a patient, when they get an implant or something like this, they want it to be a good job. They don't want some fly-by-night, implant being placed in there, or sub-quality implant. So I really think that there might be, a certain patient base that will go for that type of treatment. But, I highly recommend everyone that go back into their patient base. And if they start explaining to their hygienists what implants do and how, you're going to see more and more cases. It's interesting. How many, if you think about it, we have endodontists placing implants now.
Absolutely.
We have orthodontists placing
TADs.
And it's becoming accepted because it's a good alternative to putting a crown on a tooth that you say to the patient, you know what, just don't bite on it, or
Right.
It's not going to last a year. Okay. Or doing an apicoectomy on it. It's proven. It's probably the most successful implant out of any implant that's placed in the body. So it has a great success rate. It's just, you have to know
I love the way
which
you say
one's
that.
the treatment plan.
I love the way you said that. I had not thought about talking to patients about that previously, but 95 to 98%, depending upon the case study you look at and depending upon what their criterion for success was, 95% success rate on any implant placed in the body is outrageously high.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't want to get too scientific here, but I do have a curiosity. Do you think it's because of the inframembranous bone formation as opposed to long bone formation, and that's why those bones in our jaw are more accepting of an implant?
So intramembranous bone is always better. It always heals better than endochondral types of bone. And is
that because of the variation?
I talked about this. I talked about this last night.
Okay.
The body, when you submit it to trauma, it reacts by healing, the healing process. So I was talking about extractions. And if you have an extraction site that's not bleeding, or an implant site that's not bleeding, that's not good.
No.
Blood is good because it brings bone growth factors into the area. It brings osteoprogenitor cells to form into osteoblasts. And PRF.
Yep.
PRF. So the way that dental implants work, it causes a trauma to the body, but the body reacts in a good way.
Right.
Okay. The other thing is it's good type of bone. So we have what we call primary stability. When you put the implant in, it's stable. But then there's a secondary stability where it's more biologic, where the bone is regenerated and forms into that area.
Which is one of the reasons why Carl did not like many implants, other than the diameter and the shear strength of them.
Yes.
He, if I'm not mistaken, believed that they never achieved secondary stability, and it was always just a cortexual stability.
Exactly.
I don't know,
and that's why we used to put.
Well, you know.
Well, you know, a lot of them, like if you do orthodontic implants, you know, I do a lot of those, but I try to get bicortical stabilization.
Right, absolutely.
Because they're putting a torquing force on it. If you don't get into that opposing cortex, you're going to have a failure. So there's a technique to that. And
do you guys teach TADs at the Institute? That's cool.
A little bit. I talk about them. Personally, I'd rather do a sinus lift than a TAD. You know, you're usually
I've got an ortho who comes into my office, and I would love to be able to offer them TADs to be able to upright posterior teeth, you know, but anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So let me see here. I had one more question for you, but I got all excited about the science. So let me see if I can remember what I was going to ask you. Oh yeah. What is your opinion on this? And I'm going to ask you because it is kind of a controversial thing with old school dentists. Most new school dentists are 100% on board with it. And I see almost what I like to call a generational divide of people who came up having to visualize bone and use a Foley or a Bowley gauge rather to see what their thickness was if you weren't flapping, versus people who grew up, I like to say, on CBCT, and that is guided surgery. Personally, I think it has a place. I think that its place is not what most people think. I think most people think guided surgery keeps you safe. And I think most people think that it makes implants easy, but I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think it makes them fast. What are your thoughts?
I tell you what, like I said, I've been involved. I started with Columbia Scientific in 1988, which became Simplant or Materialize. So I've been doing guides from the very beginning. Personally, I tell doctors, I would rather you learn not to use a guide, because if you use a guide for every case, you're not learning the skills.
No, you're not.
Now, there are certain indications for guides. You know, everyone wants to do everything fully guided. And, you know, when you're right over the mandibular canal or you're right under the sinus, you know, doing it fully guided, you have to, I like to see what I'm doing.
Well, there's an argument there too. And Randy, I never correct you because like I said, you're the man, but there's an argument over the meaning of fully guided. And fully guided in the modern sense really means to be able to actually place the implant from within the guide and to actually have your thread timing sequence corrected by the guide so it stops in the same place every time. So before we get into any controversy in what he's saying, what he's talking about is the older definition of depth and angulation guiding, as opposed to only pilot drill guiding, if I may speak for you there.
Yeah. So, well, let me put it this way. The three main type of guides are the pilot guide, which you only use for the pilot drill or the first or the second drill. What that does is that gives you the angulation and basically the depth, but then you have to do it freehand.
But if you're not using a non-in-cutting drill, it doesn't matter if you use a pilot drill anyway, because you're going to go anywhere that drill wants to go. So that's a caution for those of you who are new. Don't think you're safe just because you did that. You have to have a side cutting only drill if you're going to use a pilot only.
Yeah. The second type is a universal guide where you can use any system, and However, the last drill, you have to use the surgical kit from that system.
Right.
And then the third, the Foley, like you said, is what the true definition now is you do all the drilling and you place the implant through, and it's timed. But
An amazing
margin,
thing.
There is a margin of error on that. But what some of the disadvantages that people don't look at is if you look at heat generation, which I think is one of the biggest causes of early implant failure. You know, if you look at the tube of that template, that tube has a tolerance or an opening probably about 0.25 millimeters on each side.
Yep.
So is there enough irrigation getting down into that osteotomy site? So we
and
teach a way where
not even if you're using internal irrigation, because just because of the pressure buildup, it's going to go where the least pressure is, and which is the external channel. And that's something I have a hard time getting docs to understand whenever I talk to them. But
it's hard to get it. And that's why, like, a lot of people like to do just flapless, because the old literature that stated if you lay a flap, you get X% of bone recession. Okay, that's been totally disproven.
Mm-hmm.
So the latest studies have shown there's really, if you look at bone loss and or implant failure, there's really no difference between flapless and flapping. Mm-hmm. So, but heat generation is a concern. And that's why the way we teach is we do a pumping motion. So we call it bone dancing, where you come up and down and you let the irrigation get into the osteotomy site to prevent it. Because what happens if you generate heat, that heat will expand out from the osteotomy site. Instead of angiogenesis, blood vessels coming in, instead of the osteoblasts coming in, they'll go the opposite way.
You're getting heat in
and that's why you see the early implant failure.
You know, that's almost a man, that's actually making a pretty good case for actually doing side cutting with pilot holes if you're going to use a guide. I still don't like it. But it'd be interesting to see if someone comes up with a side irrigation. You know how they have the cutout channels now, where whenever you're doing your keyless, you can come in from the side, which that was a great innovation. It would be really great if someone could come up with something like that, where the guide itself, you could use a Y splitter and you could split your irrigation between your handpiece and the guide itself, so that you had constant water going in.
Time. Yeah. So what we do is we cut out usually the buccal aspect of the guide, and we use like a monojet syringe, so you get external irrigation. But still, that sometimes isn't enough. The internal irrigation is coming back. You know, that was very popular many years ago, and then because of asepsis, it kind of went away. But now a lot of companies are starting to come back with that.
I remember the first few implants I did, I had quite a few failures, and as soon as I say it, you're going to know why. So I'm going through it. I'm making sure that all of my instruments are perfectly sterilized. I started only using a pilot drill 1 or 2 times, and that was it. And I was throwing it out. And so I was using saline instead of just sterile water. I was using sterile saline, and so it caused crenation of the red blood cells. And it was one of those epiphany moments for me. I picked it up one day, and I went, "Wait a minute! They taught me to use saline. Why the hell would I use saline?" And it started making me really think. I think that was what really, if you can't tell, I'm very passionate about implant placement and the science and the techniques behind the surgeries. And I think that was my moment of epiphany, where a light bulb went off, and I said, you have to question everything you're taught, everything.
Yeah. You need an isotonic solution.
Absolutely.
You don't want a hyper or hypotonic, isotonic, because then you get cell death. Absolutely. And that's the same with even if you're using autogenous chips from your drilling. You know how you store them. You have to make sure that you have, the sterile saline, the sodium chloride.
Right. So have you heard that one a lot, where people have come in or because I know it's taught in a lot of courses.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of sterile water I hear a lot. regular sterile water. I tell everyone the easiest thing is just buy the 0.9% sodium chloride isotonic solution, and it's good for any implant placement and or bone graft. And what we teach now is there's been some really good studies on chilling the sodium chloride. So you put in your refrigerator, and it's been shown to really prevent burning the bone.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, so just put it in your refrigerator. Yeah. It's really significant on how it decreases the temperature of drilling into your osteotomy.
Very, very cool. Well, Randy, you have been more than generous with your time, and I'm not sure if I'm going to actually be able to make the class in Dallas. I have another obligation, but I'll definitely, like I said, I'm a lifelong learner. I'll definitely be taking the courses.
Great.
Thank you for offering such a great deal to our members. And do you have any final words before I end this?
I just hope that anyone listening, it is not beyond your scope to start placing implants. And like I said, you do far more difficult procedures every day in your practice. The thing that you have to learn is the cases that you shouldn't be doing. Okay. So, and that's just treatment planning, but the experience, and that's why, like I said, I like for doctors, their first case, I like to approve it before they even touch the patient, because, a lot of cases they'll get in, it's not a good case. There's tons of cases out there that are just so simple. And after you do your first couple, you'll see how easy it is. And, the light bulb will go off. So
great place to end it. Well, guys, thank you for wasting another hour of your time listening to the sound of my voice drone on. Thankfully, we had Randy here to distract from that. And thank you for supporting the Dear Doc podcast. We'll see you on the other side. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Dear Doc podcast, your source for the business and legal questions associated with your dental practice. Don't forget to subscribe to the Dear Doc podcast on all major platforms.